Our meetings of the Board of Governors used to last, Board of Directors used to last until 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, in which we would argue over who we were going to accept. And in 1966, I decided that I was the next one going to be the Secretary-Treasurer. And the Secretary-Treasurer in those days was, we didn't have an executive director, so that was the person that really ran the organization. And I was elected in 1966 as Secretary-Treasurer, and I was looking forward to a 3-year term, and I said, my goodness, we've got to do something better than to keep people out with our restricted membership requirements. And so I decided that I'd give a test. And I remember the meeting was in Miami at the time, and I constructed it's kind of a 30-question test with 5 options. And I gave it to 30 people who were not members of AAEM, and then I gave it to 30 who would take it in our membership. And as you would predict, there was no difference in the scores. And I said, at our next meeting, we ought to do something to make our membership a little more representative of the so-called people that know what they're doing. And so that was, so they appointed Joe Goodgold and myself as co-chair of an examination committee. I simply took my examination that I had given earlier, sent it around to George Kemp, who was on the committee, and I think Bill Kennedy, and we simply adjusted some of the questions, made the distractors better and so on, and decided to give it on a trial basis in 1969. We said we were not going to use it for membership, but we were going to see how it worked out. And in 1969 it did work out well, and so 1970 was the first time that we gave an examination that admitted people to the organization. And wouldn't you know, one of the, I think we took in 19, and one of them was Jasper Dalby. One was Jasper Dalby. That was in 1970. So I have 2 classes of members, because here we are keeping people out that need the education and the advantages of what we say we have, which is pretty much, we're going to educate people about EMG. And so at that point, we decided we would take everybody in, and those people who wanted to be active members or fellows would have to pass the examination. So that was, that really was, from 1960 to 1970, the major consideration in our society. Who's going to get in, and who are we going to keep out, and how are we going to select those that we're going to keep? So we decided to have the written examination plus the interview. And then the next thing that happened that was significant in the examination process was when I became president, I believe Burt Wiederhold became Secretary-Treasurer, and that would be 1971. His wife, as I was saying, the Secretary-Treasurer did everything to keep the organization together, all of the nitty-gritty, and it was so much at that time. We were beginning to go over 300 members. Bert had his wife help out, Gisela, and she eventually became compensated as a partially executive secretary, and did help out until our official one, I think that was probably in the early 80s. But in any event, the next thing that happened in the exam was Burt Wiederhold and I were discussing the advantages of having a 3rd dimension in the exam, that is a waveform. And it turned out our meeting in 1975 was going to be in Rochester at the Mayo Clinic, and so Jasper was involved at that time, and he and Burt asked him if he would not be really the major person in developing this waveform examination, which was first given in 75, and that was the third dimension of the exam. Now, as president, I was elected in 1971, and I gave my presidential address as the year 1972 came to an end. As I was mentioning, Bert Wiederholt was Secretary-Treasurer. At that time, he had come from the Mayo Clinic to be the Associate Professor of Neurology at Ohio State. So we were with Bert for about 5 or 6 years before he left to go to San Diego. But we encourage everybody who's interested in electromyography to come in and learn and more, and when they feel that they're ready to take the examination and then move up to the fellow. One other thing which was related somewhat to AAEM was my beginning of the CME. I'm one of the first. I'm not sure I was the first, but I was very close to it, to develop a continuing medical education course, short course, 3 days on EMG. And the first one I did was in 1963. And I thought to myself, here I am isolated in Columbus, Ohio. How am I going to keep up on the latest technology and the latest techniques in EMG? And I thought to myself, the best way would be to have a short course and invite an outstanding leader and then learn from him. And so in 1963, we had the first course at Ohio State on continuing medical education in EMG, and we invited Dr. Lambert,